moving along now, we've got an opportunity to hear from Carl Gouldman, who of course is the director of the IOOS Program Office, and the many challenges that he faces. So Carl, if you would, welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Barb. Thank you, Josie, for presenting. It's good to see so many new faces and names on the intro. So some of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet. So I look forward to meeting you in person at some point. And it's nice to have more folks on the line. I'm going to try to get through these slides relatively quickly so that we have some time for Q&A as well. And I know we're running a little behind. Next slide. So this is just a summary of some of the key major key drivers for IOOS. And so we've got the IOOS Act, and then the reauthorization just passed at the end of last year. We've got a new administration, and there's a host of executive orders and then budgets and legislation that's in the works as well. The other drivers include the Weather Act, and we jokingly, or we colloquially called them Weather Act 1.0 and 2.0 for the 2017 and 19 reauthorization versions. The NOAA Water Initiative was in fact basically codified in the Coastal Ocean Observing Research Act of 2020 in Title III, and that established the Office of Water Prediction and the National Water Center in Alabama. And I am the National Ocean Service lead for the NOAA Water Initiative within NOAA, and so I'm connected to that effort as well. We are supporting the blue economy. And within that context, we are about to release a second version of the Ocean Enterprise Study. The first one was 2015 and the next one's 2020. And I've got a slide to talk about that more later. We're working on an electronic geographically based GIS system for creating use cases on the benefits of ocean observing. So we're calling that the Benefits of Ocean Observing Catalog. And we're hoping to have a prototype done by March. So any region or program in another nation could potentially put in use cases and have it be searchable, and you could get out a report in a given spot in the water. What kind of use cases do I have here? And it could be harmful algal bloom related, it could be navigation related, it could be oxygen related. The C-Note legislation that passed in 2018 is really about autonomous technologies, and it tells NOAA and Navy to work together. So that's one of the pieces of legislation that gives Navy the permission to loan us gliders for the hurricane picket line work that we're going to hear about today as well. And I put those last two items under the R&D category, the Coastal Ocean Modeling Testbed and the Ocean Technology Transition, because we have a few slivers of funding within the regional line item that we issue funding calls every few years, and we run 3-year projects. And what we've been doing is teaching others in NOAA about these opportunities through our program and trying to get other funds infused into this. And we've been able to double the coastal ocean modeling funding over the last few years by convincing folks in the water initiative that a little bit of funding we've gotten, that we've had there should go towards the modeling enterprise. Next slide. So I'm not going to go over all of this, but I wanted to show you there's a URL here for where all of the executive orders are. And one of the big ones is tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And that was one of the early ones. And then another one I'll reference is in the middle, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility executive order. And I focus on accessibility real quick because of all the issues within diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want to be inclusive of all different folks, but the accessibility definition includes accessibility to buildings and access, but it also says information technology and information services. And so from my perspective, that's what we do within IOOS. We make sure people have the information that they need, but I believe we have more work to do to ensure that it's accessible by all. And sometimes those most in need don't have the information services because they don't have the technology to get it. And many of the regions do a really good job of trying to understand that. And I think we could do more work in that arena. Next slide, please. So within the office, our priorities have not changed. This may be a different set of words describing them. There's perhaps a little bit more focus and emphasis, but overall, we're continuing coastal observing, predicting, and informing. If you hear Dr. Spinrad talk, you'll hear him talk about climate services in the broadest sense. And I put economic development and coastal resilience on here as well as a nod for, the blue economy. And within coastal resilience, we are focusing on inundation and sea level rise, but also multiple different aspects, including ecological forecasting and understanding efficiencies for getting it out of our ports and things like that. So it's not just sea level rise and inundation, but that's sort of an initial focus for, I'm calling it the first chapter in a book of activities under coastal resilience. Additionally, Dr. Spinrad's testimony to Congress is at the bottom of the page there. And if you haven't heard him speak since he became the head of NOAA, he reminded folks when he first got here that if you don't know what his priorities are, they're in his testimony. So there's a reference there for you as well. Next slide. So this is a summary of the budget that we just finished the year 21, and the funding that we got in the regional line was distributed in these areas. We lumped high frequency radar operations and maintenance and fill the gaps funding increases that have been spread out over the regions over the last several years, and the RA funding all into one core bucket now, trying not to split everything, try to put a bigger lump together. So each region is getting a sort of a lump of core funding, trying to give a nod towards that need to sustain things. The other slivers in here, like I mentioned before, that ComT sliver is 1 million, but we had 2 million in funds because of other sources. The amount that we used towards animal telemetry network and M-bond projects last year was 600K. We had 2.4 million for ocean technology transition. We had a second topic within our funding opportunity for data management and cyber infrastructure projects, and 500K is going towards that. And then, as Josie mentioned, we had 2.5 million for those harmful algal bloom pilot projects as well. Next slide. We have another line item within the budget, which we call the national line, and that's 6.8 million, and about 10% of that goes to overhead charges that go to corporate costs for NOAA and National Ocean Service. That is not charged on the regional line, and that's good in our perspective, since all that money is supposed to be going out the door. The program office uses about 4.8 million for operations, travel, training, salaries, etc. And we spend about 1.3 on projects that's mostly routed out through the regions. Some of that for subawards for data management projects and products and services. Next slide. This is a history slide. It's a bit of an eye chart. The green bars are the enacted level of funding in each year. The sort of light green is the national line item. The darker green is the regional line item. So and then the blue bars, the dark blue bar is the national president's budget request level, and the medium blue bars are the regional president's budget request level. So if you look at 2018, for instance, the Pres Bud was only 19.4 million. We had a $10 million reduction in the first year of the Trump administration, and the appropriation actually went up, 4.3 million that year. And so that Fill the Gaps campaign period was 2018 through 21. And then the unprecedented change is the president's budget increase in FY22, going up by 29 million for the regional line and about 4.3 million or 4 million for the national line. And I've only displayed on you in yellow here the house mark that Josie also showed on her slides. It was 50 million, and the national line we estimate to be about 10 million. We don't know exactly because it's lumped into a line item called navigation, observations, and positioning, and that has the base budgets for National Geodetic Survey, Office of Coast Survey, the IOOS office, and the Center for Operational Oceanographic Products and Services. So the Senate mark would be a little bit lower than that at 47 million for that yellow bar on the far right there. So we need to update our slide, and I'll do that soon. Next slide, please. So there's no numbers in that top item, but there's a check mark. So the continuing resolution was passed till December 3rd. Within that, there is hurricane supplemental funding, and we have the GCOOS damages numbers that we submitted a while ago, and I've heard nothing but what we expect to be a yes on those funds being included. There's a line item for damages in there, and from everything I've seen, that the GCOOS costs are covered in that. That's not a promise yet. we have to get the spend plan back to Congress and receive acceptance of that spend plan. And that's happening. I think NOAA's sending it this week, and I think it has to go to DOC and OMB first. But I think within a week or two, we might have confirmation of the numbers there. There's also a bit in there for hurricane forecast improvement work. And there was a huge effort within NOAA to coordinate and build a spend plan for that. And there was language in the bill for ocean observing using uncrewed systems. And while I might have thought that meant that most of the money should come to that purpose, it's not as much as I would like. And I'm not going to give any quotes on the amount yet because the spend plan is still in work, but there is a little bit in that category as well. And then, as Josie mentioned, we're waiting on appropriations. We're waiting on the infrastructure bill to pass, and we're waiting on the reconciliation bill. And there's a lot of work to be done if those pieces come to pass. One of the things that I'm really excited about and also frightened about is the need to integrate across programs and not be stovepiped if those levels of funds come. And I'm going to be pushing my team to try to connect with other programs so that we would build the best solutions that we possibly can with the IOOS regions, with the co-ops office, with the Office of Coast Survey, et cetera. So hopefully we get to roll up our sleeves and figure out the best ways to spend those funds. Next slide. All right, the ocean enterprise, a topic near and dear to my heart. So I was part of the first time we did this study in 2015, and I've been part of making it happen again in 2020, and the report is due to come out at the end of November. I got up this morning at 4:15, got on the phone at got on a Zoom call at 4:30 for the start of a conference over in London. It's called the Oceans of Knowledge Conference, and Ralph Rayner from our office put together an amazing lineup. It included Nicole LaBeouf on speaking, and then being on a couple of Q&A panels, and then the keynote at the end by Dr. Spinrad. And I've got a couple of quotes from Dr. Spinrad that I wanted to share today. So he was talking about the new blue economy as the information economy. In this picture on the left, in our ocean enterprise study, we show the value chain of providers and producers and intermediaries, and the information services we provide from our data and our models that end users then use for decisions. It's that information set that is the new blue economy that Dr. Spinrad will talk about. And when you use the information to make decisions that have a benefit, that's potentially supporting the broader economy. So if we provide precision water level data that helps a ship get into a port, the shipping that's getting in and out of the port is the broader blue economy. The new blue economy piece is that information set that's going to the ship in a new way. Some of what we've done in the past is in that new blue economy category as well. So it's not, all of it's not brand new, but it's sort of a new label. In the talk that Dr. Spinrad gave today, I just wanted to give you this tidbit. He said, he was talking about how valuable and important our information services are and how important the ocean is to dealing with the climate crisis that we're facing. And he said, our ocean can save the world. So I was like, oh, no problem. But you all know that, and I know that. What we're doing is really important, and it's being recognized at the highest levels of government today. And so that's what I wanted to make sure I conveyed to you. I've been in NOAA for over 20 years now, and I've never seen this much attention and positive recognition of our mission. And so thank you for being here and helping me, and I look forward to working with you on that. Another tidbit that Dr. Spinrad shared today is that 40 years ago, the average time between billion-dollar disasters in the US was greater than 80 days. Today, the average time between billion disasters is 18 days. And you all know that on the Gulf more than anywhere else almost in the nation. So I know that would resonate with you. So the report's going to come out in the Ocean Enterprise study here on this slide will come out about the end of November. And I look forward to giving you more details on it and talking about it in the future as well. Next slide, please. We have an advisory committee. Sarah Graves, your former board chair, is our vice chair on the advisory committee. We have some new members pending their final onboarding. Owen Hallett from Tetra Tech, Julio Morel, GCOOS' executive director, Catherine Edwards from the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography, Dan Costa from UC Santa Cruz, and Jason Biggs from University of Guam and from the PAC IOOS board. So we're looking forward to adding some new members. We're sending 3 members off for fair winds and following seas, and we've got a great set of recommendations in hand, and are working on ways to respond to those within NOAA and get back to the committee on how we're doing that. And then we've got meetings coming up in late November and December as well. The recommendations report is linked there for you, and yeah, there's the dates for the next meetings. Next slide. So within that big giant bar that I showed you of increases in the FY22 budget, we had a very short opportunity in the early spring where the administration pushed large buckets of funding increases to NOAA and said, bring us your increased items in these large categories. And while I wish I'd just been given a large bucket of funding and told Gouldman, tell us what IOOS needs the most, it didn't quite work that way. The good news is I got a call and it said, within these parameters, can you do things with this level of funding? And I said, oh, absolutely. And the things that fit the priorities that the administration identified, we had 29 million in increases for the IOOS regional line for, here they are, assessing ecological change through observation networks, coastal moorings with ecological monitoring, advancing coastal and ocean modeling prediction. So those were at 15, 4, and $10 million each. And then we had 4.3 million in increases in the national line, and 2 of those for fostering ecological resilience through conservation action, and the other 2 on data management and coastal modeling. So within that, we described and defined a new way to describe biology, animal telemetry network, and other biological observations as a marine life program. So we're working to create, I've been working with Frank McCarter for years and asking the community from the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network players to help me identify and define what operational biological observing means. And that's what we're trying to describe with the Marine Life Program. It should support existing and new marine life observations, as the gray box tells you here, and expand national cyber infrastructure, add management and dedicated data handling positions, and continue the successful interagency competitive NOP process. That's the National Oceanographic Partnership Program. So we're trying to maintain and expand efforts in the IOOS regions and marine life observing networks, and align and respond to those regional requirements as well as national priorities. So we look forward to having more conversations. We look forward to see what levels of funding we get out of the budget processes, to see how much of what we described in the president's budget increase that we can get. And it's a long game, folks. So it's really amazing that we were able to get these increases into the president's budget. And even if we don't get all the funding described, there is a next process in the FY23 budget, and there will be another one after that. And so thank you for the GCOOS team for being a part of doing biological observing in general. And I look forward to further conversations about advancing the Marine Life Program. Next slide. And thank you to the GCOOS team, especially Philemon Galliano, sorry, Philemon, for hosting and co-mentoring an EPP minority serving institution undergraduate scholar, Abigail Schultz, this past summer. Thank you to GCOOS glider team, especially you, Carrie Wilden, for coordinating the hurricane glider efforts, including a new experimental track around the loop current. Thank you to the GCOOS HF radar team for all their work preventing and repairing damage to the sites this hurricane season. And thank you to all of you on the phone here that are participating and talking about how to make IOOS happen and work, how to partner with IOOS, our industry partners, our academic partners, our nonprofit partners, our government partners. We couldn't do it without you. I hate having a list because we're leaving something off when we have one, but we have to put a few things on the slide. And if I didn't say your name, it doesn't mean I'm not grateful for your efforts. Next slide. So this initiatives to watch slide is just a few things that are going on in NOAA. When I'm out and about, I'm in a bunch of different I wear a bunch of different hats within NOAA. And part of what I've figured out through the years is understanding the inner workings of NOAA is part of how we can get our job done in the IOOS office, figure out how to connect what the IOOS mission is doing with other programs that do similar work, not duplicating effort, finding an opportunity to partner so that others understand we actually might be able to help with data management or deploying sensors or doing analysis or coordinating researchers on a given area geographically around a given subject. So as Josie mentioned, we've got the Detecting the Climate Signal document. We've got the Ocean Enterprise study about to come out. NOAA has developed a service delivery framework document, basically a team of players within the water initiative describing how stakeholder engagement is an ongoing process. And if a region picks up this document, they would look at it and they say, well, that's what we do. And that's one of the reasons I really like this document. They tried to get common terminology about the way we talk about how we do stakeholder engagement. And within NOAA, the idea is to do it consistently, corporately, so that you're gathering requirements from users and then feeding the back end so programs can know about those requirements without all having to individually go to stakeholders and causing stakeholder fatigue. It also recognizes that to do co-development of products and services that meet needs, you often need to interact with the stakeholders and iterate. And GCOOS certainly knows that well. So I highlight that because it's been recognized by the NOAA Weather, Water, Climate Board and endorsed by them. And an implementation plan is being written right now. And we're asking for them to include IOOS regions in the case studies that they developed in the implementation plan. And I think that terminology also is a way to ask for funding for the engagement and management functions within each of the IOOS regions. I'm almost done here. I'll get going a little quicker here. The other things on this list: Precipitation Grand Challenge, the Climate and Fisheries Initiative, and the Coastal Resilience and Climate Timescales. Those three items are basically started as white papers and initiatives, and they've now been moving forward under the Weather, Water, Climate Board and are becoming, they're now having implementation plans written. The Climate and Fisheries Initiative is a multi-year effort to operationalize the way we do climate forecasting and modeling. And IOOS is offering, for instance, that the marine life observing that we defined in the president's budget would be directly related to and potentially contributing to that fisheries initiative. The work that the MBOM projects have been doing to help with the condition reports and environmental assessments would also be folded in, for instance. The Coastal Resilience and Climate Timescales, the Ocean Service was the lead for getting that written. I've been beating the drum to say, can we remove the climate timescales and just say all timescales? Because we need to do coastal resilience at daily, hourly weather timescales as well as climate timescales. And the answer is yes, we can eventually remove that. This paper kind of needed to be written to get Ocean Service and OAR and other parts of NOAA aligned at the longer timescales, but there's no exclusion of the near-term timescales either. And that last item is a report that has been released now. We need to find a link and get it to you. But the executive order that I mentioned earlier that said tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad has a section 211D, and that section told NOAA and OS, the Office of Science Technology Policy, which is basically the White House, and FEMA, I believe, charged those three entities with writing a paper for how we would deliver climate and information services for the public, for the nation. And so that's a fairly short document. That's a pretty important document that this administration has just put out. So we'll get you that reference soon. Next slide. Yeah, so that's it. With that, I will stop and be happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Carl. That's a lot going on. It's amazing how you and the staff can keep track of all of that activity. It's going to be interesting to see what it looks like when the dust settles as far as the funding goes. I've just got a quick question, and then I know Renee Collini's got a question. Given the potential for increased funding and, along with that, probably, expansion of projects, expansion of staffs, so on and so forth. Do you have any concern about being able to attract new folks into the IOOS world to provide that additional support? Everywhere you go now, whether it be the gas station, the restaurant, the doctor's office, all you're hearing is we're short-staffed. And I'm just wondering, is that something that's in the back of your mind that could be an issue?
Well, I worry about the staffing needs we would have with that burden of effort that we would have to get through. I've been reading the news, as you mentioned, and thinking about what you just asked a lot. The own rate of attrition in my office is a positive sign from my perspective, which is we haven't been losing staff. And so the other thing that I'm encouraged by is we've just been through Sea Grant Selection Week, and we're trying to get an IOOS fellow again that would start in February. We only had 9 interviews, and the quality of talent that these Sea Grant fellows are coming to the table with, and their passion to make a difference for the world, specifically related to climate change and actually applying science to the needs, their energy and passion is huge. So I think we're an attractive place for people to come work in terms of this ocean space. And that gives me a lot of hope that we will be able to do it. And Dr. Spinrad and Jodica Fermani and Nicole LaBeouf in the Oceans of Knowledge Conference were talking about just that, and that the demand for the climate information and services is just going up. And so we need to signal that demand is there and teach folks that they can convert from some jobs to jobs that we need in this space. We're going to be doing offshore wind energy. We're going to need everything from technicians to accountants to mathematicians, to modelers. And so there's a broad set of jobs to be created and had. Now we all have to figure out how to make jobs flexible and good work-life balance so that people are able to hold those jobs and be happy with being in them. So that's one of the things our office is focusing on too, is trying to stay flexible and make sure people feel appreciated and that they are valued for what they're contributing.
Great, thanks. Let's see, Renee, do you have a comment or question? I see it's in the chat box.
Yeah, I'll just ask it. Hey, Carl. I mean, I was thinking of this just because I work a lot with other agencies besides NOAA. The USGS has their Coastal Hazards Program, along with a lot of other groups that are also really trying to come together. And I know that through NOS, there's been some cross-agency collaboration that IOOS can support so many different kinds of efforts. And I imagine that it's, things are going to get missed just from a bandwidth perspective. So do you have any recommendations for those of us who are working so closely with other agencies to help make sure those connections are being forged? Is that going through the NOS Interagency Task Force, or is there some other direct path to IOOS to help make those connections?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so we have an Interagency Ocean Observation Committee, and that is a good venue for agencies to talk. Often, though, you find at the regional scale, regional level, you have folks like Troy Pierce from EPA working with GCOOS, and that makes a connection, and you don't have to necessarily get that to be sorted out within DC, and that's okay if that happens that way as well. I really like Mark Osler's introduction last week. We had a coastal ocean modeling workshop for 3 days, and he kicked it off, and he was talking about partnering and how important when you're partnering with others is being willing to say, okay, I will stop something because you're doing it and I don't need to anymore. And so I guess that's a plea towards try to think about things in a novel way and try not to be stovepiped and offer, open a hand, open an ear to have a conversation about connecting dots. I'm not sure that really answers your question, but that's a piece of the philosophy that I liked that Mark was pushing last week. And I'm happy to talk about it more.
Being willing to stop something. I think that's a really important piece that we miss a lot of times, is everyone started a thing and they want to keep doing their thing, even when it's really not in the best interest.
Yeah, I'm going to keep using it. I think about it too now that I'm like, wait, if I'm going to go, I'm kind of upset about this thing that I think someone else is doing. And I was like, wait a minute, let's have a conversation. Maybe I can stop doing something. Wouldn't that be nice?
Thanks, Renee. Pat Hogan, you got a question for Carl?
It's just more of a comment. Well, 2 things. Carl, I really admire your optimism for being able to get the people that, you think these efforts needs. To me, sometimes it's kind of a mixed bag, but assuming you can get these people, these are some pretty substantial increases for FY22. Do you think you can spend those funds in FY22?
Well, the more daunting task for me is getting the numbers straight in terms of carving up a spend plan out of a chunk of funding for a specific topic area becomes sort of a boardroom challenge. And so I say that because once you get the parameters and understanding what the rules of the road are, it's easier to answer that question. And so our office with the regions, when we get a supplemental, we usually have to do new funding opportunities. We know how to do that, but we don't have the experience with this level of funding. I'm more concerned about the grants management division in NOAA and how they could staff up to help us do that work, because we can't get things through that bottle without getting that cork out of the way, if you will. So I know that's a big concern for all of the CFOs within NOAA, and I know that the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations is focused on that some, but I don't know. We can't do it so much until we have a little more certainty on the funding coming. For the pieces that IOOS thinks it has equities in, I'm not freaked out by it. I know we would need more staff to help our existing team. The existing expertise we have is good, so that if we had to do separate funding opportunities, for instance, for the infrastructure bill, we know how to ask the right questions to try to get that done as efficiently as possible. And that's what Josie was talking about, having conversations with our network of players to at least understand the art of the possible, and then try to get down to really quickly the practical. So try not to be totally rose-colored glasses here. So my job would be to assess what can we get done, be honest about it, ask for the timeframes that if we think we need to ask for extensions on part of it, and to get the job done. But like I said, I think on the front end side, the infrastructure bill that calls for 500 million for coastal inundation and sea level rise, and it puts about 5 different pieces of legislation in there. So there's about 4 or 5, 6 offices that would have equities in that. And it tells us to do integrated services. But I think if we get at a table together and figure out a reasonable way to split that up so that we can do that work, we could build the integrated services plan sort of next, if you will. So that's not a really clean answer, but that's an answer.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, Carl, again, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today. We're glad you're here. We hope you can stay for the remainder of the meeting. And good luck. Many challenges lie ahead.
Yeah, I didn't say thank you to Barb, but we're going to get to do that later, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to, thank you, Barb, but I will be thanking you again.
Yes.
And thank you, Joe.
Anytime. Okay. We next.